I'm Craig Kenneth, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. Every relationship is different and every breakup is different. Work with me and you'll get professional help on your situation. And if you're in no contact, focused on personal growth, my workbook series, The Knowledge, will help you make changes like you've never made before. Available now at AskCraig.net. Hi there, I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And in this video, we're going to be talking about respect was lost in the relationship.
Man, this is a tough one when it happens because respect is so foundational to any relationship.
Absolutely, and a lot of times we lose sight of that, but we also slowly start to let things go. Because we love somebody, we're attached to them, and we realize that people aren't perfect, and neither are we. And so it can wind up making the relationship get worse and worse. So obviously, in a healthy relationship, there is a good amount of trust and respect for each other. And of course, two people aren't always going to get along. There's going to be issues. You're going to have arguments. You're going to have disagreements. And, you're going to say things that you don't mean at times. But overall, having respect is to have, positive intentions within yourself for that person and have a positive view of that person overall. Sometimes people get caught up in that black and white thinking, right? Where we think people are going to be perfect. But people get tired, they get irritable, they get moody, and then bad behavior starts to come out.
Right.
And so we're going to be talking about how these things happen in relationships. Because when respect is lost, the dynamic and the foundation of that relationship is going to crumble.
And we see many breakups around a loss of respect. There can be one comment that a partner makes that just changes the whole dynamic of the relationship and causes it to just crumble completely. And so in this video, that's what we're going to focus on, is how respect affects a relationship and how you speak to each other, how you treat each other. As with most things we talk about on this channel, a lot of things are tied to early experiences. So we want to start out with that. If you grew up in a home where there wasn't much respect for one another, where treating a sibling or a parent mistreating you was normalized, being in a relationship where you're seeing these things will probably not raise as many red flags as somebody who has grown up in a secure environment and taught, how to be treated with kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. You just get desensitized to it.
And then you start to think that it's normal.
Yeah.
You start to think, well, this is how people treat each other when they're in close relationship. This is how people who are attached, or you let your behavior towards your partner slide a lot easier. So you might be surprised with how you treat your partner and how comfortable you can get with them. Some of you have grown up in environments that were very hostile. You've seen your parents fight each other, sometimes physically, sometimes there's a lot of verbal aggression, sometimes towards you if you made a mistake, or towards, your siblings if they made mistakes. And so being in this environment, we really just adapt to it and we absorb everything as children. This is something that is so important to remember, because you might think, okay, yes, my family was a little bit chaotic, but it wasn't that bad. For kids, as their brains are developing, they are picking up on everything. And so they are learning what behaviors are appropriate and not appropriate by their environment. So I say this because childhood matters. Exploring your own childhood, talking about your partner's childhood, or thinking about your ex's childhood in this case, could be really helpful to giving you those pieces of insight.
Absolutely. You got to take a look at these things.
And then you also learn the message as a kid when you see this disrespect in the household normalized, that you can treat people like this and they won't leave.
That's big.
That they will stick around no matter what.
Yep. Unfortunately, I saw that in my own house with my mom and my stepdads, and I've talked a little bit about them on the channel before and their behavior. And I'm sure my first stepdad, who married my mom when I was really little, was an alcoholic. He drank Jack Daniels all the time. Just kind of like a quiet drunk, but then he'd get mean and nasty. I think he was doing other drugs, but that was when I was young, and I didn't even really know what drugs were at the time. So, but I think he was. And then my second stepdad, he was even wilder, bipolar, punching holes in the walls, you know. And so I saw my mom tolerate all kinds of terrible behavior. And in a way it felt normal, even though I was like, Mom, this is crazy, you know. He's punching the wall and getting in my face, wanting to fight me over nothing.
Yeah.
You know? So you get used to this, and you don't realize how crazy it is, and then your friends come over or they hear about it and they're like, this is not normal.
Yeah.
Like, this is...
I have a story like that too. I remember going to one of my friend's houses when I was a kid, and her family was very different than mine. I'll just leave it at that. And I remember there was one day where her mother got mad at her, and she had like slammed the door or something like that. Moments later, maybe like, I don't know, half an hour later, the mom walks into the room where me and her are talking. She sits down so gently on the bed and she apologizes to her daughter. And I remember being mind blown by this, because I had never, ever in my life seen an adult apologize, especially to a kid. And so that really changed my view of what a family could be, or what's normal or what's not normal. I thought, well, you know, my family never apologizes. Should we be? You know, and how would this affect how we treat each other?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting as a kid when you get little insights into how other kids live with their families.
Can you give an impression of your mom when she apologizes? With her thick accent?
No, I don't know what it would be like.
You've never heard it. Just imagine.
Thinking so hard. No, kidding. My mom's a lovely human being. But she is Italian.
She's got a very thick accent, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you know, parents that you see later on in life as they grow old and they mature, they're also evolving. So if you look and see, well, my parents, or my partner's parents, they're completely normal. They're so sweet. They're so nice. Things may have been very different when your partner was a small child, when, you know, they might have been young parents under a lot of stress. So their behavior as, you know, older adults might not be reflective of what your partner experienced in childhood.
Yeah, and we don't really understand or think about these things, that we often don't take the time to really understand what it was like for our partners and how they might get affected or triggered in our connection, or they may start kind of acting like their own parents did, which is what we want to talk about next, is that a lot of times our adult relationships are mirroring the relationships that we saw in our childhood. And because we had like that blueprint from what we saw love is like, and it just felt normal to be like that, whatever your version of normal was in your house. Okay, my normal depended upon the stepfather that was living there, right? So one time,
I knew you were thinking of something.
Yeah.
Okay, what is it?
When I was laughing about your mom, I was also thinking about my stepdad. One of my best friends was over, and he was staying in the guest room, and my stepdad, he was in like one of those bipolar manic phases. I don't know what the hell was going on. He opens the door to where my buddy's at, and my buddy's just sitting on the bed, and he goes, "What are you looking at?"
Oh my gosh.
I can't even do the laugh like my friend did it. My friend was terrified.
Oh my God.
Absolutely terrified. And like literally we called up one of my other friends to like go pick him up, because my stepdad, he started a fight with my girlfriend at the time, an argument with her, with me. He was just out of control. He would probably have been drinking for days. Who knows what he was doing. So I could just remember those moments, and it's like, we were saying earlier about friends being there. So you have a friend there, he saw it in person, and he's like, absolutely, he's like, it was the scariest moment of my life, the way he looked at me.
Yeah, and it's wild because you do see your friend's reaction, and because you've been so desensitized, you're almost numb to whatever is going on. Their reaction awakens the awareness of, wow, okay, there is something a little different here. You know, why aren't I reacting like that?
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in adult relationships too. There might be something that you spurred out to your partner where they have a reaction or they interpret it in a way that you just think, well, what I said was totally rational and normal.
Yeah.
And they have a completely different reaction than you expected. So it is all about perspective. It is all about what you were raised in and what you grew to be comfortable with.
Yep. But it has a big impact on your understanding of how to treat people and what respect is for yourself and for how you respect other people.
Right.
When you have stepdads that are not respecting you and they're threatening and they're violent and disappearing for days at a time and all kinds of wild things, it's like a madhouse. It's just chaos.
Yeah. And for some of you, the beginning of a relationship is super healthy. The both of you are infatuated with each other. There's a lot of love. Some of you will say, oh, we never fought in the beginning. Well, yeah, of course. That's the moment where you're connecting and getting to know each other. You don't know enough about each other's flaws to fight yet. And normally there is one or a couple defining moments in a relationship that completely flip the dynamic. And this can be what I said earlier, a comment that's hurtful. It could be a look. It could be a certain behavior that's received as rejection. It can be almost any little trigger that will cause you to look at your partner differently.
Yep.
And change the way that you treat them. And many of you will, on a call, say, okay, I still have feelings of anger about this particular moment in our relationship where I was really hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
These things will string along for a long time if left unaddressed in the moment. And they can build up and pile up one on top of the other.
It's a good point, because it's like, we kind of feel like, oh, just because we're not talking about it anymore, they've let it go, they've forgotten about it, they moved on. But in many cases, no, they're still hurt and angry about it. Or you are, and you're hurt and angry about it for a long time.
Right. And many of us start to get this idea of, it's okay for me to treat my partner poorly because they did this thing in the past. And maybe your partner has the same idea. Well, you did this to me 5 years ago, so you deserve to be treated this way. And this tit for tat can be an endless cycle, which is a downward spiral. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
Absolutely. So at this point, contempt often starts to form and build up inside of us, right? Things that start to bother us, things that have happened, slight mistreatments or misinterpretations of things, right? Sometimes we misinterpret things because we're sad or hurt or sensitive, or we've been hurt in that area before, right? So then what happens? It kind of starts to spiral and get worse, and you see things like name calling, demeaning comments, passive aggressiveness, emasculating comments. A lot of times, if you're dating an avoidant, I've noticed avoidant women tend to say, especially dismissive avoidance, you're acting like a woman.
Or you're acting like a kid.
The woman is the one that comes up the most. You're acting like the woman, right? Because they're like, for them, they feel like the guy is being too emotional and they don't like it. And so like, you're acting like a woman. So that's the thing. And so I've heard that come up a lot.
I can see that.
So they start to say and do things like that, and just gets worse from there, and you don't even realize it, but you're starting to disrespect each other more. And when you do that, you don't really love that person as much, because you're not really nurturing them and caring about them. You're just focused on how you feel and kind of lashing out when you have to get something off your chest, right? And so you start to get a lot more anger for the person, and the contempt builds up. You start to see flaws in their character, start attacking their character, and then you have one of the four horsemen.
Contempt.
With John Gottman. He talks about that in probably a lot of his books, right?
Yeah. And the four horsemen, this is the four things that really send a relationship to its end. So these are the four things that he uses to predict the end of a relationship, basically. We have other videos that talk about it too.
Yeah.
Of course, you can research more about John Gottman. He has amazing work. But this contempt piece of really starting to view your partner as someone bad, as someone who has bad motives for you and for your relationship, can really just turn everything around.
Yep. So You may find that you're both treating each other more poorly, and that you're treating friends better, or that they treat friends better. And a lot of times, if you think about it, they will treat a stranger better than they'll treat you. They'll treat the cashier or the waiter nicer than they treat you. You've been in a horrible argument on the way to the restaurant. They've been awful to you. Then they get there and like, hi.
And it's interesting too, because sometimes there will be an aspect of public humiliation if the disrespect can get bad enough to where other people around you start to notice and start to see, okay, the two of you are constantly bickering. The two of you are constantly saying mean things to each other in public around friends. And other people do pick up on that and start to notice if it's bad enough.
Yeah. I had one ex-girlfriend get furious at me at Home Depot because they were taking too long to find the price of the object.
Oh my gosh.
And she got furious at me.
This must have been before the internet.
So she like stormed out like screaming and yelling, and it was like, oh my God. She had been in a terribly abusive home growing up. So she had a lot of emotional problems, but it was embarrassing. I was like, what the heck is this? Like, you're screaming at, how is this my fault? And by the way, that wasn't the Applebee's girl. I know everybody's going to assume it's her. No, it was not her. She never did anything like that.
Yeah, but these things can get to the point where it becomes more public, and sometimes it can get worse from there. And sometimes it's even worse in the home before, the stuff that you see in public is just a sliver of what it actually is. And so
That's
be
true.
mindful. There might be friends and family who are seeing this that are also trying to protect you.
That's true.
And your relationship starts to feel like a battlefield. This starts to feel less like a team that you're in, but you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells. You feel like you're constantly protecting your ego and having to defend yourself, stand up for yourself. That connection starts to get lost. You don't see the other person as someone that is your partner anymore. And this can be really painful. This is a heartbreak within the heartbreak.
Yep. Love is a battlefield.
It is.
Pat Benatar.
Is that real?
Yeah, that's a song.
Oh.
You never heard that song? Yeah, really? Oh. We'll have to play it later. So what do you do about it? What do you do about this stuff?
Start with the roots. We always talk about this, going back to childhood, going back to where these things started from. And you might be surprised with what starts to surface. Memories that maybe you had forgotten about for a long time. It could be, relationships in your life that are still troubled. You might still have a hard time with certain family members, or you might be even estranged from your family.
Yeah.
So starting with the roots will be a great place to gain insight and to gain understanding of, why this came about. This helps to not beat yourself up too much, to understand that, there is a reason for this, and it isn't just because you're an evil person who, wants to wish others harm. It's more because you are a hurt person.
Yep.
So starting with yourself.
Yep. And one of the feedback that I get often from the Creative Healing course was the story of your life activity. A lot of people will actually ask friends and family for that information about their childhood, and it starts to become a lot more clearer. And you and Margaret did a really good job with that, because that was like really in depth.
Yeah.
That was one of the things Margaret really wanted in the course, was that story of your life. And it's broken into 4 sections, so it's not too overwhelming. But I've had so many people be like, I started that story and I couldn't believe it. They'll be like, I learned these things about my childhood. I had no idea. I learned that this happened to me, and I was in the hospital when as a baby, and I didn't even know it. And do you think that's affecting me? Yes, we do.
And knowing these things helps you to have more compassion for yourself. There's many people who grew up in this kind of toxic environment and then later experience a lot of guilt, remorse, confusion, not knowing how to consolidate feelings of hate or feelings of, treating a family member poorly while still loving them and still wanting that connection and wanting that nurture from them. So working on these core issues is definitely a great starting place.
Absolutely.
Of course, moving over to other things behaviorally in your relationship to start to reverse this pattern. Like I had said before, tit for tat can go on forever. And if you're dealing with some petty people, it can go on for a very long time. And so it takes...
It'll never end, right?
It
You're
will
always
never
going to
end.
have a grievance about something.
No, somebody has to say the last word. I was definitely that kid growing up. I had to say the last word. My mom would be like, "You're in trouble." I'd be like,
You're in
"Fine."
trouble.
Yeah. All right. Just go on.
It makes you feel like you have a little...
Yeah.
By the way, my 5-year-old does that. So, same
It's a
thing.
thing, you know? At some point, someone needs to surrender. And we talk about this word a lot, or this phrase, a bid for connection. And John Gottman talks about this too when he talks about connecting again after a conflict or repairing after conflict. So a bid for connection, you can think of it kind of like the exit sign in a movie theater. You know, it's your little escape from the argument that you're having, and it's an escape from the tension that you're experiencing as a couple, and basically you extending an olive branch to your partner to say, hey, I know things are tense right now, we're not going to solve everything in a day, you know, can we connect even on this micro scale, just as a place to start?
Yeah, sometimes somebody will be like, I made you a hamburger. Do you want one? Or I cooked this. Do you want to eat? Something small like that where it's like, I've done something nice. Don't attack me.
Right. And it is also up for the other partner to be aware of these bids for connection. Because sometimes a partner will give a bid for connection and you are so angry that you push it aside.
That's right. And that's what we say with the indirect direct approach. Some coaches will say ignore it. But we're trying to tell you it's a bid for them to connect. Now, of course, we don't want them breadcrumbing, but that's a whole other story.
Right. I know one of the things that my mom used to do when my parents would argue is she would go out shopping. She'd be like, I need to leave the house. And she would go shopping for him. So she'd buy him a pair of pants, a tie, something, and come home. And, you know, that's how things would slowly repair. But there has to be this little exit of the conflict, you know, and this can be humor, depending on the humor of your partner.
Yeah.
You know, it can be like a joke that's made. It can be, you know, just bringing awareness to yourself and taking responsibility. Even just an I'm sorry can go so far. So thinking about these little bids for connection. And it can even be a reassurance of, I know we're fighting right now, but I am committed to this relationship still. You know, what are some things that we could do together to at least feel connected while we work on this problem?
Yep. And it's nice in your childhood if your parents said things like, you know, I'm angry at you, but I still love you. You know, it's something I make sure I say with my daughter because she is very independent, right? And so she can be really defiant and non-compliant and whatever, and she needs a lot of redirection. She's a challenging child, right? But she's also hilarious. And so you got to find ways to work with them. And so I'll always say to her, listen, I'm upset, but we still love you. I still love you. And reassure her, and that makes her feel a little bit better. Because I don't want her to feel like even if I'm angry or upset at her, that I don't want her to feel like she's not loved.
Yeah.
And I wish my parents had said that to me, you know?
And it does go a long way. You know, a lot of you don't realize it, but it doesn't take much to reverse this. You know, it just takes a little bit of humbleness in your relationship to be able to be the first one to do that.
Yeah, it's not easy to do.
Next is just working on those relationship skills and how to communicate. With conflict, the more specific you can be, the better. A lot of times we just start to generalize and say vague things like, you know, you're always so mean to me. Okay, well, what does that mean? Was there a specific moment that was particularly hurtful? Can we go back, revisit that, and kind of peel back the layers to see what was really going on there? So not being afraid to have these conversations and not being afraid to be vulnerable. I will put a disclaimer here because we had talked about physical abuse. This is one of those things that, in my opinion, I will also speak for Craig and say in our opinion, is completely intolerable.
Yeah. And Margaret's opinion.
Yes. Yes. So that's my little asterisk to this entire video.
Yeah.
If there is physical abuse, you know, please find professional help.
Absolutely. Yes.
And protect yourself and your children if they're involved.
Very important to think about.
So besides physical abuse, other things that you can do to repair that connection is also thinking about what initially attracted you. Many couples who are in this constant conflict cycle will start to think, where did this whole thing go wrong? This is nothing like what we were like in the beginning, maybe even the first couple of years of our relationship. So thinking about those initial things that brought you together, was it shared hobbies? Was it, shared values? And revisiting those things can help to reignite that connection. Remembering positive moments, thinking back on those memories that you do enjoy together, thinking that there is hope, that there are positive moments, can be really helpful. Self-reflecting and thinking of your partner's intentions as being positive. Sometimes when we're angry, we can get paranoid and start to think, my partner did this on purpose because they want me to suffer. When we start getting into that thinking, can be...
We'll spiral out of control. You have to be aware of those things, especially when you're anxious.
Right.
When you're anxious, that anxiety will take over and it will just catastrophize and it'll just get worse and worse.
So think of your partner as somebody who is on your team and really think about restoring that friendship first. Would you treat a friend like this?
That's a great point. That's a great point. If you always think about how you treat your friends, a lot of times, you think about how you treat your partner, it's like, man, I would never treat my friends like that, right?
Yeah.
It's so wild that we do that. I think so many people take their partner for granted, So you always want to understand that if you mistreat people, they'll leave. So you want to always do your best to treat them with kindness and respect, even when you're frustrated and upset, because ultimately, if they don't feel cared about, they're going to leave, right?
And another reminder, adult relationships are conditional. So nobody has to tolerate disrespect. Nobody has to put up with it. Nobody has to be willing to work it out if they don't want to. So just remember that and really be mindful of how you treat each other.
Absolutely. All right. So hopefully this one's been helpful to you. Of course, if you want to get our help personally, you could do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype. Victoria is also available for Skype coaching.
I'm here whenever you'd like to chat.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to schedule with her. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.